This trip will include lecture series on Bart Ehrman, on the deity of Christ, debating the subject of homosexuality. By the way, the profaning of marriage took place in South Africa years ago. And the continued dialogue with Muslims there in South Africa as well. So that's all coming up, and your support in being able to do that is very, very important. I wanted to do this back in like November, and things happen. You know, we get buried with stuff, and I've got stuff. I've got a final that I've got a bunch of grading that I've got to be doing over the next 2 weeks. Just a tremendous amount of grading, and if it ends up in my inbox, it just keeps getting pushed down. If it's not at the top, I feel terrible. Things happen, and that's what happened with this as well. Yes, shifting to a Muslim topic. If you're thinking about tuning out, however, because it's Islam, what can I say? You might want to stick around, because if I have time, I might make some comments about some stuff that happened on Twitter yesterday. Maybe. We'll see. I'm not promising anything. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. Let me just play a little portion from Yusuf Ismail. This is in the Juma Masjid in Durban, South Africa. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'll sort of have to fill in, because it takes him a while to get around to his point, basically. And I have the book up, so I'll sort of make it for you. But here's a section. This is the section. We did 2 sections, the Christology of John, the Christology of the Quran. This is in the second half, toward the end of the debate. And so let's let Yusuf speak for himself here.
Now we're looking at Arabia, the context in which, you see, I assumed, I knew what the argument was.
I don't know why does that happen at times? It's out of sync. It's not out of sync in the file, because I've watched it before. Why does that happen? Well, just listen to it. Try to ignore the out of sync part. I don't know why that happens, but it does.
Now we're looking at Arabia, the context in which, you see, I assumed, I knew what the argument was tonight. I already knew what James was going to say. And James is saying, the basic thrust is, how is the Quran addressing people who didn't believe in what they have? Well, thanks to a mutual friend of ours, Dr. Shabir Ali, he recommended this book to me, The Bible in Arabic, The Scripture of the People of the Book in the Language of Islam by Sidney Griffiths. Have you come across? You haven't come across this book yet. This book, this particular individual, he's a scholar, he's a specialist in Arab Christianity, in the history of Arab Christianity. He's a specialist. We'll focus on a bit of his writings. Basically, he goes on to suggest, thank you very much. Thank you, James. You're very honorable. You're honorable man. No, don't do that. We don't want to intimidate James. We don't want to intimidate myself.
He was doing that for me. Come on.
Oh yeah, he did that for James. Certainly. Takbir. Okay. What Sidney Griffiths says. Sidney Griffiths is an Arabic scholar. And what he says is that in the context of the 6th century, recognizing the Quran's Christians, a wealth of information that exists, he says that scholars have basically gathered evidence providing that the major Christian communities in Arabia were the Melkites, the Jacobites, and the Nestorians. That's in the historical context in which the Quran was in fact addressing. And he quotes on a book by a world-renowned scholar called Irfan Shahid, Rome and the Arabs, a prolegomon to the study of Byzantium and the Arabs, Byzantium and the Arabs in the 4th century, in the 5th century, in the 6th century, in volumes 1 and 2. It basically deals with the identity of the Arab Christians in the immediate pre-Islamic context. And what Sidney Griffiths points out is that these Christians, in fact, did have the beliefs that you claim those Christians never in fact possessed.
Now, I'm trying to summarize this. Obviously, the entirety of the debate, you can watch it for yourself, and if you feel I'm cutting him off too short or something like that. But the book, the scriptures, the Bible in Arabic, I obviously got hold of it as soon as the debate was over. In fact, I think I got it while I was still there via Kindle. I'm not sure. No, I couldn't have, because that's next to impossible to do in South Africa. Anyway, what basically is being argued is, when I look at the text of the Quran, I'm asking a simple question. Do I have a basis in the text itself? And see, my Muslim friends, you got to understand, not do I have a basis in later Islamic orthodoxy, but do I have a basis in the text itself? Because you'll have to admit, there's tafsir literature that you reject. Some of the early tafsir do not follow the later rules that were developed, and so you don't. Mukato, for example, very, very important material, but you reject it because it doesn't follow the later standards, things like that. But that tafsir literature, that interpretive literature of the Quran, I want to look at the text itself, not how it's interpreted later on. And I find most of you to be very hesitant. And in fact, on these very texts, whether it be Surah 547, Surah 116, I'm getting completely different interpretations from pretty much every person I debate. I've got a different interpretation from Bassam Zawadi, which actually Yusuf mentioned his disagreement with Zawadi here in just a few seconds later on in this clip. I've got Bassam Zawadi, I've got Abdullah Kunda, I've got Yusuf Ismail, I've got Shabir Ali, and they're all varying from one another. There's no consistency there. And this is partly because I've said for a long time there's a vast difference between interpreting the text of the Quran and interpreting the text of the New Testament. We have so much more knowledge about the background of the New Testament than we have about the Quran that it's very difficult to do verse-by-verse type exegesis of the Quran itself. Anyway, the whole reason I raised this issue is because Yusuf used this as evidence that, well, actually the Quran does show knowledge of what Christians were believing at this particular point in time. Well, first of all, Griffiths admits that he is presenting a very minority perspective in scholarship. Let me give an example from his book. This is right before the section that I want to focus on. Scholars have not, this is talking about Surah Al-Ma'idah 73, Surah 573.